ring on the, sounds like there's a little ring. Sounds like it's maybe a little hot. There we go. Ah, good. All right. We are back on Revelation, and we are in chapter 16, verses 12 through 21. So bring the mic down just a little bit. It's still a little bit tinny sounding to me up here. We are working on the last two of the bowl judgments, number 6 and number 7. Would someone read Revelation chapter 16, verses 12 through 16? Thank you. Place called Armageddon. You've probably heard of the term Armageddon before. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But back in verse number 12, we see that the sixth bowl judgment is the Lord preparing the way for the armies of the east. He's preparing for world war. The water of the Euphrates is dried up, which makes it much easier for the armies to just pass as they travel from the east into Israel. The Euphrates starts in Turkey and then flows down through Syria and down through Iraq all the way to the Persian Gulf. This links with the sixth trumpet judgment, where the 4 bound angels are released and the army of 200 million. And it's found in Revelation 19, verses 13 through, or Revelation 9, verses 13 through 19. It says, "Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, 'Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates.' So the 4 angels who had been prepared for this hour, this day, this month, and this year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision, and those who rode upon them. They wore breastplates, the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur, and the heads of the horses were like lions' heads. And the fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these 3 plagues, 1/3 of mankind was killed. By the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents and with heads, are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. So these kings come from the east, which literally means the kings, excuse me, kings coming from the sunrise. So out of Satan, the beast, and the false prophet come these unclean spirits like frogs. In verse 13, we see that these unclean spirits like frogs are coming, are loosed. These are demonic spirits, and they come for a specific purpose. I like watching true crime things, and very often you will hear people who commit just horrendous murders tell them that they have a frog demon. So I just find it interesting. There's these evil spirits, often described like frogs for some reason. I don't know what connection that has. I just find it interesting that even today you hear of people committing just horrendous things and saying a frog demon told them to do that. But these are coming for a very specific purpose here in Revelation 16. It says, "For they are demonic spirits performing signs who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty." The purpose of the unclean spirits is to deceive and gather armies of the world to come against Israel. I want to warn you, not all wonderful signs are of God. These demons are going forth, and they're doing these wonderful signs, and they're really impressive, and yet they are demonic spirits. So be careful not to be drawn away. We're told in Scripture that there is a test for spirits. Won't go into that right now, but test the spirits. We are told to test the spirits. In Joel chapter 3, verses 12 through 16, speaks of this event as these demonic spirits are rising armies up against Israel, so that the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Now this is not a glorious harvest. This is not a harvest of souls who are coming to know Christ. This is a harvest of people who are standing against Christ. This is going to be a very bloody time. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Multitudes, multitudes, in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near, in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord roars from Zion, and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But the Lord is a refuge to his people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. The valley of Jehoshaphat is also known as Armageddon. Jehoshaphat means Jehovah is judge. They are gathered specifically to a place called Armageddon, or in the modern terms, it's called Har Megiddon in Israel today. And in verse 15, or in verse 16, we see that they are gathered there in Armageddon, or Har Megiddon. This is the Megiddo Valley. It's just about 80 miles north of Jerusalem. But in verse 15, we see a word of encouragement from Christ to those who are going through this tribulation period. Behold, I am coming like a thief. And blessed is the one who stays awake. Not only is this message for those, I believe this message is for us today. This is something that we can learn today. We need to be ready. We need to be aware that the end could come at any moment. There's nothing left to happen for things to start rolling quickly. Pay attention. Don't get distracted. Keep the main thing the main thing. I've been contemplating that all week. We can get so distracted by so many things. There's a war going on in Sudan. There is persecution ramping up in Israel. There is political fighting going on here in the United States. China is rising up. People are getting nervous about what's going on. Keep the main thing, the main thing. Don't get distracted. But what about AI? What's that going to do to us? Keep the main thing, the main thing. Will AI take over and destroy all of humanity? No, because God has made promises. So, we know it's not going to destroy us. Keep the main thing, the main thing. Don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by this world. Don't get distracted by the cares of this life. Don't get distracted by everything that Satan can throw at us to draw our focus away from why we are here. Joshua told us to know God. Madden told us to hear God's voice. Colin told us to be about God's business. Why does God, why should we have a heart for the poor? Because God has a heart for the poor. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. And here, especially in America, it's so very easy to get distracted. We can bring up television on our computer, on our phone. We can be watching television all the time and never see anybody around us. Keep the main thing, the main thing. I like sports. I've got to be careful. I've got to be careful to keep the main thing the main thing. Basketball playoffs are going on right now. Suns are doing well. Okay? Keep the main thing the main thing. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on. We wear the garments of Jesus Christ, the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Those of us who are believers, we are not clothed in our own righteousness. We are clothed in the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Keep our garments on. How we live matters. Moses talked about it. We need to be people of obedience. We don't have just a ticket to heaven, and then from there we go about and just do whatever we want. That's a wrong concept of God's grace. When we understand the mercy of God and what God has done for us, has forgiven us of, we have a desire to live a life of worship, a life of obedience to God. Again, this warning is for those who are around during the Great Tribulation, but I believe we have something we can glean from this today. For the tribulation saints, this is a warning, and yet it is an encouragement. Jesus is telling them, this is not the way it's going to be forever. Behold, I am coming quickly. Behold, I am coming like a thief. This is not going to last. The time is going to come when you will not suffer like you are now. That's for the tribulation saints. They will be suffering greatly. But what about our brothers and sisters? We have brothers and sisters in India who are being beaten, who are being imprisoned. We have other places around the world where it's dangerous to name the name of Christ. It's dangerous to tell someone that you are a follower of Jesus Christ. It's not always going to be that way. It's going to come to an end. As we see these things going on in the world, it seems like it's building towards a crescendo. Do you understand what a crescendo is? Okay, for those of you who are musically inclined, like Moses, like Joshua, crescendo is where you're building to a climax, and the music gets louder, and the beat gets heavier, and there's excitement building up. This is what is going on today. There's this crescendo coming, as like waves in the ocean. The waves come up, and then they crash down. This is the day we're living in. Just to let you know, I know what the word crescendo means, but my musical ability only goes as far as choosing songs on Spotify. That's it. I can play Spotify. Jesus is coming soon. And he's telling these suffering saints, hold on. Hold on. You can hold on a little longer. For these saints here in the tribulation period, he's saying, hold on, I am coming to set up my millennial earthly kingdom, and I will rule in righteousness. My heart breaks to see the utter lawlessness going on in this country and around the world. My heart longs for the day that Jesus comes and makes everything right, sets everything anew, sets up his earthly kingdom. But now, in this period that we're looking at, he is pouring out the last of his wrath upon the earth. Verse 16 says they are called together to Armageddon. The armies of the world are gathered to this place called Har Megaddon. And this is where we get the term Armageddon. The word Har Megaddon is in Hebrew. So it's in the valley of Megiddo. You can go there in Israel today. The word Armageddon means the hill of Megiddo. Literally, it means the place of slaughter, the place of gathering. And it is in the Jezreel Valley. It is in Israel near Jerusalem. And it's not far from Mount Carmel. You're familiar with Mount Carmel, yes? What happened in Mount Carmel? Elijah came against the prophets of Baal. And they were doing what to themselves? They were cutting. Armageddon, a place of cutting. A place of gathering. He's going to gather the people to Armageddon for a great war. The very center of what we call the Fertile Crescent is the Valley of Armageddon. It's part of a natural highway that goes from Europe to Africa. It is 22.5 kilometers wide and 32.25 kilometers long. Napoleon said it is the most natural battlefield in the whole world. And when you drill down on this word, like I said, it means a place of cutting, to cut yourself, which just speaks volumes of what happened with Elijah and the prophets of Baal. 1 Kings 18:28. And they cried out and cut themselves after their custom. After their custom. This cutting of themselves was not a one-time deal. They did it. It was part of their custom, part of their ritual, part of their worship to Baal. They cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. Another meaning of the word Armageddon is the hill of slaughter. There is some thought that Armageddon is in Jerusalem, actually. And there are some references to the Lord's return and judging from Jerusalem. Joel 3, verses 1 through 17. For behold, in those days and at that time will I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem. I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel, because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided up my land, and have cast lots for my people, and have traded a boy for a prostitute, and have sold a girl for wine, and have drunk it. What are you to me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you paying me back for something? If you are paying me back, I will return your payment on your own head swiftly and speedily. For you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried my rich treasures into your temples. You have sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them far from their own border. Behold, I will stir them up from the place to which you have sold them, and I will return your payment on your own head. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the people of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabeans, to a nation far away. For the Lord has spoken. Proclaim this among the nations. Consecrate for war. Stir up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Hasten to come, all you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Bring down your warriors, O Lord. Let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But the Lord is a refuge to his people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain. And Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. In Zechariah, we see something similar. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming. For the Lord, when the spoil, behold, a day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out in exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights on the day of a battle. On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from the east to the west by a very wide valley. so that one half of the mountain shall move northward, and the other half southward. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azel. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all his holy ones with him. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost, and there shall be a unique day which is known to the Lord. Neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. On that day living water shall flow out of Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer and in winter, and the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord will be one, and his name one. The whole land shall be returned into the plain of Geba and Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site, from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's winepresses. And it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Jerusalem shall dwell in security. This is a promise where when Jesus returns, his feet will touch down on the Mount of Olives. I've stood on the Mount of Olives. When you're there, you look west and you see Jerusalem. You see the Temple Mount. To the east, on a clear day, you can look all the way down to the Dead Sea. There's no life in the Dead Sea. You cannot drown in the Dead Sea. But if you drink the water of the Dead Sea, you will die. You see, water flows from the north part of Israel, down through the Sea of Galilee, down through the Jordan River, into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the lowest spot on earth not covered by oceans. So there is no outlet. Water does not flow out of the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee has water flowing in and water flowing out. It's teeming with life. Water flows into the Dead Sea. The only way of escape for the water is evaporation. So over the years, it just keeps getting thicker and thicker because the minerals don't evaporate. The water evaporates. When you put your hand in, you rub your fingers together, and it feels like thick. Feels almost like oil. And when you go out into the Dead Sea, you float. You don't sink. It's really weird. But here, this sea that has no life in it, the waters will flow from the Temple Mount down into the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea will be healed, and it will be teeming with life. How God does that? I don't know. Not my job. Revelation 14, verse 20, and the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. And we studied that a while back. Won't go into that right now. So back in verse number 19 of chapter 16. The great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great, to make her drain the cup of the winepress of his fury, of his wrath. So it could be that during this great upheaval, there will be this Jezreel Valley, this Armageddon will go all the way to Jerusalem. I don't know. You hear me say often, speculation is not interpretation. So I will leave you to your own speculation, because your speculation is just as good as mine. back in chapter 16. We'll start at verse 17. We just finished up the sixth bowl judgment. Now we're moving on to the seventh bowl judgment. It says the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. Notice it. He's not pouring it out into the sea or into the land or into the streams. He's pouring it out into the air. And a loud voice came out of the temple and from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. And a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. I believe the seven seals of Revelation chapter 6 summarize the seven trumpet judgments and the seven bowl judgments. We see that the first seal reveals four horsemen and 4 horses and 4 horsemen. The fifth seal details the persecution of the saints. The sixth seal reveals the day of the Lord. The seventh seal reveals the seven trumpet judgments. The sixth seal appears to be the same event here as in Revelation 16. Revelation 6, 12 through 17. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the full moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and every slave and free hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" The seventh angel poured out his bowl in chapter 16, his bowl upon the air. And a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." This final plague completes the wrath of God. His wrath is now poured out. There's nothing left. Verses 18 through 21. And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was the earthquake, and the great city was split into three parts. And the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. That is incredible. Every mountain is shaken to its core. Every mountain is brought down low. Every island disappears. This is very similar to what we saw in Revelation 16. Every mountain and island was removed from its place. Just as the flood of Noah's day, so I believe this will also be a worldwide event. back in 16, verse 19. Talks about the great city. When it's speaking of the great city, here it is speaking of Jerusalem. Matthew chapter 5, verses 34 and 35. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. The great king would have a great city. Psalm 48, verses 1 and 2. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, in the city of our God, his holy mountain, beautiful in elevation. It is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. We also see in Revelation chapter 11, verses 7 and 8. And they have finished their testimony. The beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city. These are the two witnesses that the beast makes war against. The great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. This indicates that is Jerusalem. There is reason to believe that Jerusalem will become the capital of the false religion, which is Babylon. Revelation 17, verse 18. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Chapter 18, verse 10. And they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. Verses 16 through 19 of chapter 18. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is in the sea, stood far off, and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. And verse 21. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. It would make sense that the Antichrist and the false prophet, the ones who are looking to imitate Christ, would set up their headquarters in Jerusalem. Make it the seat of their false religion. The city where the Lord said he would put his name forever. It says the city is split into three parts. In Zechariah 14, verses 1 through 11, Behold, a day is coming for the Lord when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out into battle, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights on the day of battle. On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split into two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mountain shall move northward, and the other half southward. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountain shall reach Azal, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all his holy ones with him. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost, and there shall be a unique day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. On that day living water shall flow out of Jerusalem, half of them to the east and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer as in winter, and the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord will come. We went to Zechariah 14. This is verse 9. On that day the Lord will come, will be one, and his name one. The whole land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site, from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate, to the corner gate of the tower of Hananel, to the king's wine presses, and it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Jerusalem shall dwell in safety. So as we see, when Jesus' feet touch, there will be this great earthquake. The Mount of Olives is a long ridge of a hill, and it will divide and go to the north and to the south. It looks like the city of Jerusalem will be split into three parts, but the Temple Mount will remain. Ezekiel chapter 47, verses 1 through 12. Then he brought me back to the door of the temple, and behold, water was issuing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. And water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Then he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around to on the outside of the outer gate that faces toward the east. And behold, the water was trickling out on the south side, going on eastward with a measuring line in his hand. The man measured 1,000 cubits and then led me through the water, and it was ankle deep. Again, he measured 1,000 cubits and led me through the water, and it was knee deep. Again, he measured 1,000 and led me through the water, and it was waist deep. Again, he measured 1,000 cubits, and it was a river that I could not pass through, for the water had risen. It was deep enough to swim in, a river that could not be passed through. And he said to me, Son of man, have you seen this? Then he led me back to the bank of the river. And as I went back, I saw on the bank of the river very many trees on one side and on the other. And he said to me, the water flows toward the eastern region that goes down to the Arabah and enters the sea. When the water flows into the sea, the waters will become fresh. Like I said, the waters of the Dead Sea, if you drink it, it's so toxic, it will kill you. Now the water becomes fresh and good to drink. And wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live, and there will be very many fish, for this water goes there, that the waters of the sea may become fresh. So everything will live where the water goes. Fishermen will stand beside the sea, from En-Gedi to En-Galim. And it will be a place for the spreading of nets. Its fish will be of very many kinds, like the fish of the great sea. And its swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. And on the banks, on both sides of the river, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail. But they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water for them flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. So back in chapter 16 of Revelation, we see these great hailstones. I don't know if any of you have ever been caught out in a hailstorm. Here we get little pea-sized hail. They don't do any damage. They just bounce on the ground and they'll gather. I was in Kansas one time. I was in my big truck, that truck, and there was such a storm that hailstones, a little bit smaller than golf balls, were coming down, and the noise on my truck was so loud I couldn't hear anything. I had to pull over, and I just got in the sleeper, and I waited for the storm to pass, and when it passed, it had broken each of my windshields. I had 2 windshields that came together. Each one were broken in 5 places. That was hail about that big. Imagine hailstones coming down 100 pounds. You have to run into caves. You have to find a place of shelter. As these come down, they will be destroying buildings. They will be destroying everything that they crush, that they land upon. But yet the people cursed God. They still refuse to bow their knee to God. This is the 3rd blasphemy of chapter 16. But the Lord gets the last word. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 16 says, "Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, when he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death." I believe this continues on today. Now, we don't go out and stone people today. That's not what I'm calling for. But God will not give them a pass. The blasphemy we see going on today is widespread. And they will pay the price. That's why we need to tell them that there is forgiveness even for blasphemy if they reach out to Christ. We see the Lord will bring this death sentence to those who blaspheme his name in chapter 19. So, just a summary of the 7 plagues of the 7 bowl judgments. The first plague is wrath upon the earth. The second plague is wrath upon the sea. The third, wrath upon the rivers and springs. The fourth is wrath upon the sun. The 5th plague is wrath upon the throne of the beast, the Antichrist. The 6th plague is wrath upon the great river Euphrates. And the 7th plague is wrath upon the air. This is going to be a terrible, terrible time. But there's a way of escape. It says the Lord is the refuge for his people. The Lord is our refuge. We have a way of escaping this wrath of God. You see, we have a choice. We can either take the wrath of God for ourselves, or we accept what Christ did for us on the cross. He poured out his wrath upon Jesus on our behalf. We can accept that, or we can take the wrath for ourselves. I personally like the choice of Jesus taking the wrath for me, because the wrath that I would take would destroy me. Every knee shall bow. and proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord, either willingly or with a begrudging heart. So it's not a matter of wanting to worship Jesus or not. It's, does Jesus pay for my sin, or do I want to pay for my sin myself? I believe the time is short. I know I say that every time we get together, but I believe the time is short. We have a job to do. Let's keep the main thing the main thing. Let's pray. Lord, thank you